Hey guys, Dr. Fridge here with a little video about the problem 2, problem B. Maybe I should have named these homework 1 and homework 2 so we don't say problem too many times. Anyway, I thought I'd do a little video for you guys showing you how this works. I have here real quick what the doggy should look like when we're done, but I've cleared it out, so now we just see it's just black, right? So the whole point is to go in here and make some changes. We have this HTML, and we're just going to do some CSS selectors to make this modified. Now, this isn't just strictly HTML. This is actually something called an SVG, which is a scalable vector graphic. And that means that it's a series of instructions on how to draw different shapes and sizes, like circles and rectangles and paths, to make vector artwork. But you can see that it's defined in a very HTML style, XML style pattern. So even though these are just still tags, it's going to be interpreted by the browser a little bit differently because it's an SVG. A lot of times you can do SVGs in, say, Adobe Illustrator or other kind of applications and output your work as an SVG, which is a vector. In fact, all the graphics on my UWF are SVG just because they scale a lot better for display on Retina displays. But anyway, that's kind of beside the point. Alright, so the whole point is we're going to try and get the doggy to show up right here. So the first thing we want to do is get these circles to have a color fill of that. Alright, so as we know about CSS, it involves having the name of the tag that we want to style, so I can say circle, and we just put some content here in the middle. So we're going to change the fill to be whatever that is. Now this is a hex value, and if you think about it, well, what's 5F, 5F, 5F? Well, my little editor here is showing me it's a gray color, and that's good because it's equal parts red, green, and blue, and so it shows up on the spectrum right there in gray. So circle is going to be that. If I come over here and hit reload, I should see that, yeah, that those circles have that thing filled out gray. Everything else is going to be black right now. Alright, so the next thing we want to do is have the paths have a stroke of gray and a stroke width of 8. Alright, no big deal. So we'll just come in here and say path has what? A stroke of same color, that gray, and then we're going to have a stroke width of 8. Get rid of that little quote, and then a stroke dash width. So what he's putting those things in quotes, you can see that VS Code is helping me to autocomplete. So these are some of these are attributes that are unique to these SVG tags, but it doesn't really matter, right? It's just the whole point is you have a selector, and then you have an attribute that you're changing. So we're changing the stroke. And in art, stroke is the outline around a certain pattern or shape. So the stroke is going to have that color, and then it's going to have a thickness of 8 pixels. Alright, so when I hit save, it's probably not going to change too much right now. Oh, okay, well actually it does. It does the cheeks of the dog, which is great. Alright, so we'll keep working here. Circles should be colored white. Not a problem. Now these are circles with class small. The problem is, if I said circle colored white, so the color would be the fill, right? So if I come over here and say circle fill white, okay, that's not going to work too well, right? Because it's going to also fill in the doggy's head. So what do? Well, we take a little hint from the fact that these have small there, okay? So if I said, well, I want to do circle.small, and that's going to say all circles that have the small class on them have a fill of white. Now you notice that I'm actually using the literal word white, and that's fine. In HTML you can either, or CSS rather, you can have the word white, or I can choose to say all white by saying all Fs. Okay. I can also just say 3 Fs if I felt like it. It's just a little shorthand for all white. But whichever way you want to do it, let's just do all Fs so that we're consistent. So color goes from FFFFF to 000, and you can see how the numbers change anywhere you are in the spectrum, right? From all white to all black. Now that'll be good for the moment, but I think we're going to run into trouble and we need to be a little bit more specific. Okay, that's good. It does the circles. It does what we need. But wait a minute now. This is inside of a thing called contained. And this is inside of a thing called contained as well. Now, if I really wanted to be specific and say, I only want the circles here to be white, and I want the other circles to be this color, now I've got a problem, because if I did circle.small is white, then how do I deal with these circles? Well, the difference is I would say something even more specific. I would say g.contained, which has a child of circle dot small, has a style of, has an attribute of fill. And so this is going to be the fill of this. You see what I did there? So what I'm doing is I have a more broad general style that's for all circles that have a class of small, and then that's going to take care of all of them. But then right below that I have another definition that says, but wait a minute, for the circles with a class of small inside of a G that has a class of contained, I want them to actually be brown. So this is my exception to this rule, if that makes sense. So usually you define things in order of specificity from broad strokes down to specific. That way the stuff below overrides the stuff above. Okay, so now we've got some little pupils there for the doggy. Okay, now we're going to go on. So we have just taken care of that step. So let's take a look at this one. Now the circle and rectangle in this group should be colored CO, CO, CO. All right. So this is another G contained, and it has a circle and a rectangle, and I want to style both of them. Okay, that's fine. So if I did G.contained, that has a circle, and my G.contained that has a circle, I want to have a fill of CO, CO, CO. Okay, that's going to take care of one of those things there. It's going to give me that. But I also need to deal with the rectangles, right? So how do I deal with the circle and the rectangle? Well, what I could do is do it twice, if I felt like it. And that would certainly work. The problem is it's a little bit of a duplication of effort, right? And we know about DRY, don't repeat yourself. So yes, this would probably work. Let's just see. Yeah, okay, that does the little nose. But one thing I could also do is this. Oops. I could just do comma and put that there. Now I say, all right, for G tags that have a contained class that have a circle inside, or for G tags with a contained class that have a rectangle inside, make that circle and that rectangle this fill. And it should have the same effect, and it does. Awesome. Okay, so we're almost done here. Let's see what else we've got to do. Let's see now. Did that. Okay. And have a stroke of none. Okay, so we'll do stroke. All right. Use a single rule with the group selector, and that's what we're doing here. We're using a single rule. Okay, so it's a group. The path should also be filled with a color CO, CO, CO. All right, this path right here. But have a stroke of that color with the width. Okay, now we're getting really complicated. Let's figure out what we can do here. So first, I'm going to type in path. And this is a path with an ID of interactive, so might as well be specific. Path pound interactive. That's just like putting this dot over there, right? But I can put this pound here. So this says path with an ID of interactive. Okay, and so what does he need to have? He needs to have a fill with a color of that. Okay, so we're going to say fill of that. Good. And then we need to have a stroke for him as well. Okay, and that stroke is going to be BD25OD. Okay, and then finally it needs to have a stroke width of 4 pixels. Good. Alright, in addition, when you hover over this path, its fill should also become that. Alright, so if I come back over here and hit reload, there's my smiley, but the fill is not happening yet. So how do we deal with that? A couple of you guys missed this, so pay attention to what we do. Alright, so I have this path interactive. Now below the path interactive, I can say path interactive again, but I'm going to use this little action selector, I guess you could call it, of hover. So now when I have a path that has an ID of interactive that has an action of hover happening, I'm going to change his fill to this. So I'll say fill. So he's normally going to be gray, and his fill will be the same as that stroke. Okay. Now that works. I hover over his little mouth, and he's like, hey, I'm a doggy. Great. Okay, let's keep on moving. All right, got a couple more really hard ones here at the end. So rectangles should have an opacity of 0 right down here. Note that the previous rectangle in the container should remain opacity of 1. Okay, so I go find the previous one here, and I'm going to set his opacity to 1. And then up way here, I'm going to say rect, which has an opacity of 0. So I set the rule to be opacity 0, because this is just all the rectangles, and I don't really have a class or anything to otherwise distinguish them, so I got to go by the tag, and I'll say this rect tag is going to be an opacity 0, but this is the exception to the rule with an opacity of 1. Let's see what that does for me. Oh yeah, nice. Finally, this path should have no stroke, considering a pseudo class. Okay. Alright, so if I say, oh, this is a path I need to also worry about, okay? Now, the pseudo class I looked into was called last of type. And you could use a lot of different ones for that if you want, but I'm going to say stroke. None. Okay. There are other ones in there. We can say, let's just go look for a list of pseudo classes. So last of type is a good one. And so this one represents the last element of its type among a group of sibling elements, right? So that's kind of what we have here. We've got a path there, and maybe up here too. So it's going to just say, go get the last one in this whole page, and I want it to have this style, whereas the other guys don't. So it only applies to one of those. So it's, oh, there we go. His nose is fixed now. Okay, so that's exactly what we wanted. I always talk about using the least amount of force possible to get the job done with CSS. So now I should be able to run my jest, and I can see that it'll pass all my tests now. Should anyway. Yep. Oh dear me. What happened? Oh yeah. Okay. Well, there I go. So it actually needs to be white. Literally needs to be white. Try one more time. Okay. Yay. Alright guys, well there you go. That's your little tour, and I did it in under 15 minutes, so see you on Monday.